Hello there, this is Marche. I'm the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we introduce our guests and get started, I do need to do a little bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own and however true, funny, or interesting are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. Well, we are thrilled to bring you this educational presentation today. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions using the chat box. And our guest speaker has agreed to answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. Now, if you ask a question in the chat box and we don't have a chance to get to it, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. We are happy to reach out to you after today's event to field that question. Once again, we want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for a clarification or expansion of the material. Well, I'd love to introduce you to today's guests. Chase Tushouse is a partner with Tushouse Group. Prior to becoming a financial advisor, Chase worked in the manufacturing industry as an engineer for L3 Harris and SpaceX. Chase graduated from the University of San Diego with a Bachelor of Arts and Science degrees in Industrial and Systems Engineering. He's a member of the University of San Diego Alumni Board, the co-chair of USD's Shiley Marcos School of Engineering and Computer Science Alumni Council, and a member of the Oceanside Theater Company Board of Directors. He and his wife, Julia, who is our speaker today, are parishioners at St. Charles Borromeo in Point Loma and spend their free time, mentoring local youth. And we're excited to have our speaker today, Julia Tushouse, and she is an experienced school counselor in both private and public schools and an expert with UCEZ. She has an MA in counseling psychology for school counseling, and Julia supports a diverse population of students with the college application process and achieving their post-secondary goals by helping them procure offers of admissions to hundreds of schools, including nearly every Ivy League, UC, Cal State, and other top-rated institutions. And Chase, I know you're not on camera yet, so I'd love for you to say hello, and then we'll turn the time over to Julia.
Great. Thank you, Marche. Yeah, hello, welcome. Very excited for this, mostly because we have the most beautiful college counselor in America. And I can say that not only because it's true, but also it's my wife and not get in trouble for it. So really excited to have her here. I thought I knew how to get into college because I went to college, but that's not always the case. So I think she's going to have some really cool points as someone who has witnessed her work multiple, like COVID, we're all stuck here in a virtual world, listening to her counsel students. I mean, it's very impressive. So you're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to her. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Julia, welcome.
Wow. Thank you for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Julia Tushouse, as has been already mentioned, and that is my embarrassing, wonderful, supportive husband. So I'm here to talk to you today about finding the right college for you, meaning for you and your students. So if you are a parent, in the process of going through the college application world or high school, or you have young ones that you're thinking about this in the future, or you yourself are even thinking about college again, this is all about finding the right college for you and your family. So there's a couple different criteria, and the main thing I want to distinguish as we get started is there's criteria that goes into choosing a college at different stages in life. So in the very beginning, usually students are thinking about applying to a college because it's the only one they've ever heard of before. And this might be in the beginning of their high school career. I want to go to the one that my older sibling or my best friend or aunt, uncle, parent, and that's the one name that I know of, and that's where I want to go. And that ends up being the beginning of the process, the very first thought of where do I want to go to college. And then it starts to evolve as a student gets through high school and hears about things from their peers, as they watch things on television, they just research more, are exposed to more, and it becomes a little bit of a larger list. And that's the list that, after some research and students look into schools, they end up finding a list of schools they want to apply to. And then there's also the criteria that goes into where does a student actually end up attending college? What are the things that go into that final decision in the spring of their senior year after you've applied and you've gone through all of this and you have all this 18 years of life experience? What makes up that final decision from the family, parent, student perspective? So there's 3 different criteria that we'll cover today. That's student interest, acceptance, and then the financing piece of it. I think that's usually the most underrated piece of all the criteria that I've seen, and having worked with students for over a decade now, I've kind of seen it go every which way. So we'll be discussing those 3 areas of criteria, how that correlates to a family individually, what their wants and needs are, and then hopefully we can provide you with a few resources to get you started and to keep moving forward with this process. So the first piece that I just referenced is the student interest piece. So this is going to be different areas of criteria that make up why a student is interested in a college and why they choose that college. So you can see this is just a general list. It's trying to be as sweeping as possible. There's obviously other reasons and other things that go into all of this, but if you are really completely lost, or I often have students who just say, I am super indecisive. I have no idea even where to get started with this. These are pieces of criteria that you can look at. And the easiest one is the first one with location. So location meaning, what part of not just the country, but maybe even the world does your student want to attend a university? Do they want to be in a new environment, completely away from family, discovering new culture, new things? Do they want to be kind of in mom and dad's backyard, being able to access home, do laundry on the weekends? Where do they want to be? Or even the other piece of it is, do I want to be a flight away, but then on top of that, maybe a 2-hour bus ride even after I've taken a 3-hour flight? So logistics and location are 100% a great way to start. I have students usually just eliminate different parts of the country when I start recommending colleges to them, because the location is a really huge fundamental piece that will indicate just the entire 4-year journey of college for them. That next piece is type of college. So public versus private. And that's going to be, what kind of institution is it? Is it funded by that state or that government money being supported by it? Is it in-state or out-of-state tuition? Or do you want a private school that is really focused on small class sizes and it's a smaller population and it kind of has those private school perks? What kind of experience do you want? What type of college? Academic programs. This one might seem somewhat the most obvious, because obviously you go to college to study and get a degree. So what academic program are you going to be pursuing? Do you want a college that has 150 majors that you can choose and change your major 6 or 7 times as you evolve as a person from 18 to 22? Or do you want to find a really selective, specific college, like a polytechnic program where all they do is, heavy STEM, heavy research? I don't want to, take a philosophy class on the side. I just want to do engineering and computer science, and that's my life. So academic programs, as the college that you're applying to or looking into, does it even have the major or the program that you want to walk out of college with after you graduate? And then population. Population and size kind of goes hand in hand. Population can indicate what type of student, what type of person are you going to run into when you're on this campus? So are you going to go to a school that's really, you want to be around really high energy, high pressure, high academia, where everyone in there spent 4 years of high school doing nothing but studying and taking all honors and AP classes, and everyone was the top of their class and everyone spent all their free time filled with activities? Do you want to be surrounded by those peers, or do you want to be surrounded by people that are all across a range? Do you want diversity? Do you want, students who also had a nice work-life balance while they were in high school, and so they're attending a college that has a little bit more flexibility in who they allow into their school? So the population and size, the size piece also comes into it with how many students. If your student is currently enrolled at a 4,000 student high school, a big public high school somewhere in the US, then maybe a 33,000 student public college is not going to seem intimidating. But if you know that your student's enrolled at a smaller private school where they've maybe been with the same 30 to 100 kids since they were in preschool, maybe a 33,000 person university might seem a little overwhelming for them. Maybe they want to look at those private schools that are between the ranges of 2,000 to 10,000 students. So size and population kind of go hand in hand. And then student life, values, and diversity. Those three also kind of, correlate to each other as far as a college's personality goes. So I like to sometimes compare college to getting to know people and getting to know their personalities and learning, okay, what are their values? What do they like to do on the weekends? What are they going to prioritize in life? Colleges have that same kind of energy, the same way that a human being does. So they have personalities, they have values that they prioritize. Do you want it to be a school that really promotes sustainability and making changes in environmental science, and they're really conscientious about the plot of land they're on? Or do you want a college that is super hyper focused on technological advancements, and they're going to be all about global exploration and getting things out there and streamlined in the tech world, or a liberal arts college? So students that are able to do it all, and they're studying history, philosophy, while they're also studying more hard STEM subjects, but they're going to come out with this overarching idea of life and how they navigate things, how they make decisions, and how they see the world. So student life is, what kind of activities are you doing on and off campus? So what kind of clubs and organizations are available? What kind of honors societies? What kind of student leadership can you participate in? And then values is that really that heart and soul of a university? What do they prioritize? What are they going to show you? Who are you going to be surrounded by? And who are you going to be a little bit when you come out of all of it? And then, of course, diversity, too, is how important is that to you? What kinds of people do you want to meet? Do you want to be all over the place, or do you want to be more streamlined? So that's just in general some criteria that when it comes into student interest, what they're looking at.
Well, Julia, we had a couple questions come in here, if you don't mind. So one of them, so how do you find out about the culture of a college that you're interested in?
That's a wonderful question. It's absolutely the easiest way is to be on a college campus's actual campus and do a tour where you interact with other students. And when you talk to a college representative, college reps are always assigned to different regions, to different high schools across the country. So you can look up who the college rep is for your particular student's high school. And getting to speak with someone who actually has hands-on experience there is going to be a really good first step. Mostly because when students start with just the school website, all of them start to look the same. It gets pretty repetitive and redundant, and they all kind of seem like, well, you all care about this student life, and you all care about technology and sustainability. It all sounds the same. So getting that actual hands-on experience, and there's a couple different websites where students actually do review their colleges. So different places that you can look on the internet, but getting that hands-on in-person experience, which I know has been pretty difficult in light of COVID, where everyone hasn't been able to access college campuses. But that's also why going on the websites and looking for virtual tours and looking for different webinars and things like this that colleges set up for you to get to know students and faculty and reps on the actual campus.
Great, thank you. And I know one, kind of related to the academic programs, and that's, I think we're talking about like different majors, right? Now looking ahead and considering, well, how employable is that degree, or, what even like average salaries, especially when compared to the cost. Now we might get into some of this a little bit later, so you can tell me to, pipe down for a bit, but certainly interested in that element of it too.
Yeah, pipe down for a little bit. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
Perfect. So the next piece, the second tier of how does a student choose a college, how does a student find a college that fits, is the acceptance piece. So beyond just interest and, oh, this meets all my criteria and this is where I dream about being, okay, where is your student actually going to get in, and where are they going to be accepted? Because obviously a student can't go to a university that denies them. They can only attend a university that accepts them. So the first piece of talking about acceptance, are those acceptance rates. So that's sometimes it's published, sometimes it's not on a school's website. Some schools that are more highly selective are a little bit more on the edge about promoting their actual numbers, depending on which type of application it is. When a student applies early, it might be different than when a student applies by a regular deadline. That's a whole other world that we could get into if you hire a college counselor to work with you talking about deadline types. But as far as acceptance rates go, what this actually means is that it's a percentage. So how many students apply to this university and how many do they accept into their university? And you really have to take those numbers, for many that are data driven with a grain of salt. Because a university like a University of Washington, for example, on their website, it says they have a 40% acceptance rate. 40% is pretty much that average. Okay, I feel pretty confident, if I'm a solid student, I think I can get into a school where they accept almost half of the kids that apply. That sounds great. Well, it's very misleading because they accept 40% of their applicants, but they reserve about 60% of those spots for Washington residents. So if you are an out-of-state student, I work with students all over the country, but predominantly a lot of California students, and they get really excited about University of Washington, Pacific Northwest, 40% acceptance rate. I feel like I can get in, but the percentage drops probably to more of a 18 to 20% for an out-of-state student, which is going to push it into a whole other bracket as far as whether or not it's a school they're likely going to get into or not. So taking a look at those percentages and always really analyzing, and talking to somebody about what does this actually mean? Is this actually a school that I can get into or not? So the numbers really can be as low and as scary as 6% for a place like Northwestern and University of Chicago, or any of the Ivy Leagues actually have even gone down to scary 3 and 4% acceptance rates. All the way up to, you'll find some really big public schools or some private schools that are just not that well known that have around 90% acceptance rates, which means you pretty much just have to graduate from high school and you're going to get accepted into that university. So acceptance rates are really important. It's a piece of data that you can pay attention to as you're searching for schools to apply to and seeing if your student is going to actually get in. I think in the next piece, selectivity. So this is the highly talked about, if a school is selective enough. So often there's a lot of pressure put on prestige and on whether or not a school is going to be good enough, or is it worth applying to. If it's selective, that must mean that it's a better college. And it truly is not always correlated directly to that. Selectivity, I want to kind of bust that myth wide open with colleges are not always looking for that student that answers everything perfectly and has taken all of the APs and honors classes and has cured cancer and done all these amazing things. It's truly not what it takes to get into college, even though it feels that way a lot. So particularly because we are in a test optional generation right now, maybe something good that will come out of the pandemic is that colleges had to take away the SAT, ACT requirement, which means that they're no longer using those standardized tests in the admissions review process. So the big question is, what are colleges looking for at students in this generation? What can they provide on an application to show who they are when for so many years we've been trained to think it's GPA and test score. That's what gets you in. So realistically, what colleges are looking for are it's individuality, it's uniqueness, it's original thinking, it's honesty of who a student is. They want to get to know how you spend your time, who are you going to be on their campus. And what ends up making truly a college more selective, while we're on the track of myth busting, it's really a numbers game. It's all a popularity contest. And I always like to tell my students, is the most popular person at your high school the coolest one or the most successful one or really the nicest person? Popularity is not always correlated to quality. Sometimes it's just the person that everybody knows. So what's happened in the US in particular is that everybody knows the same 50 names. They know the same top colleges, or the same colleges make it on, the US News ranking every single year. And it's hard to deviate away from that because of, we could do a whole other webinar talking about rankings, but basically, people apply to the colleges they know because they don't spend a lot of time thinking about all the criteria and doing the research to find schools. There are over 3,000 universities in the US, and that means that there's a lot more options out there outside the top 50 that have those really crazy selectivity, low acceptance rates. So when you're applying to college and you're thinking about, you know, where you want to be, who you're going to be on those campuses, what can you provide, what parts of yourself are going to be on this application, that's how you improve your chances into getting to a school, is choosing colleges that are a more appropriate fit for you, that you're going to reflect, hey, I care about the same things, I value the same things, I want to pursue this very specific academic program and have the internship that I saw one of your recent graduates was able to attain. If you get to know a college the way you get to know people, then you're going to put yourself into that application and show demonstrated interest to these colleges that really increase your chances. So when we're talking about selectivity, sometimes people put themselves in a situation where they're only applying to those really low acceptance rate schools when you could choose a different list and you could have a lot more options with colleges that might be a much better fit for you as far as, you know, long-term, what are the goals, you know, getting into talking about employment rates and job placement rates after graduation, retention rates. I think those are the main things that are not actually talked about a lot when it comes to the ranking piece of why is the school a good school? Is it worth applying? Well, are you paying it? What data are you paying attention to? Because if you start looking at colleges with strong retention rates, meaning students don't transfer after a year, or graduation rates, meaning the student graduates within an actual 4-year period, they don't waste extra years trying to get into classes or changing their major too many times because there's not enough guidance. And then also the job placement post-grad percentage. I would look at those rankings and those rates before any sort of general gathered US News or Forbes, you know, ranking immediately, because that actually is long-term success, long-term return on investment when it comes to college, because your college degree really truly should be an investment in your future. And then, well, yeah, next conversation, talking about building a balanced list. So this is good to piggyback off of what it means to build a appropriately selective list. So this is the three-prong system I use with my students. Building a balanced admissions list means having an appropriate number of schools in each of these three categories. So a reach school is a school that is above and beyond your student's profile. The average accepted GPA and test score, or the general profile of the student, the amount of extracurriculars or honors or awards they get, is above and beyond where your student is at. That doesn't mean it's an impossible situation. That just means that it's not a likely. It's a reach school. We're reaching for the hope of that opportunity to get into that college. A target school is going to be a school that is exactly on track for where your student is at. You know, how many sports they played and how many clubs they were a part of. If they had a part-time job, what's their GPA? And then maybe if testing sticks around for a while, if they submit a test score, what's their test score? So a target school is just that. This is on track for me. I fit the average accepted student, and this feels good. I feel like I could get in there. And then a likely school. Likelies historically were called safeties. I'm sure many of us have heard that term plenty of times, and we have taken that away because so much has evolved and there's just so much competitiveness and there's so much unknown, particularly in how COVID has impacted the college admissions world, that we never want to say safety, but we do want to say likely. So you are above and beyond the admitted, you know, you have at least the minimum GPA for this school, and historically how students have gotten in the last few years, you are just already over there. I can look you in the eye and say, yes, this is a likely school. You can bet on this, but no one ever wants to say safety. You want to just make sure you always have backup plans all over the place, and you have a certain enough number of schools in these categories so that you know you'll have options at the end of the day when you are trying to decide on a school.
So Julie, there was one question. I mean, you mentioned COVID, so I'm sure we all have plenty of questions around that.
Sure.
But I mean, with COVID, have you seen more students opting for virtual only schools or like mostly online classes? How have you seen that?
That's an interesting question that I would say the data is still being gathered on for. From what I've experienced so far in conversations with college reps and just seeing what the health of a lot of universities out there, students are craving in person. They're actually really wanting that experience back for the most part. And even with the universities that have been requiring vaccines, even in states that might surprise us based on the number, of people vaccinated, they're not leaving college. They're not withdrawing. They're not dropping out. They're not making alternative plans because students really do feel that in-person experience is what they're paying for. And I think that that's really what they're working towards. So students, I think at the beginning of COVID, there were a lot of transfers. There was a lot of going to a school that maybe was more cost effective or maybe doing a semester at community college, but they're all moving on now and trying to get back to in-person four-year universities, getting that experience that they honestly have been promised for most of their life. And I think they're finding more value in that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of taking maybe a gap year in that now enrollment, first year enrollment this year might be a little higher. So
yeah, definitely. So the third piece, this financing piece. So this is the big one that I think isn't always discussed enough. And I have gotten into a rhythm of talking to my students about, have you sat down with your parental units and have you had the conversation of, okay, what can we actually afford? Where are we at? Do I have a college fund? Have you been saving? Or is this something like I need to work all throughout college to pay for this? Or do I need to get creative with applying to scholarships? So just the money talk, the money conversation, which probably in a lot of families can be very uncomfortable, or typically for a teenager isn't something they always want to talk to their parents about. It could be a point of contention. But when it comes to college, it needs to be a necessary conversation. College is paid for through a few different avenues. And obviously it's a big conversation right now in the US that students are experiencing a lot of debt. Students are experiencing not being able to see actually that return on their investment because they're stuck paying their student loans well into their 40s, and they're not actually able to reap the benefits of getting a decent job after their college experience because they're practically making minimum wage depending on how much they're paying towards their student loans after they graduate. So the main piece is, the first piece of it is this financial aid piece. So how can I initially make college as affordable as possible when I'm 18? What can I do? Or even when I'm younger, when I'm in high school, what can a student do? They can apply for financial aid. So there are a couple different application types, and there's a couple different resources that students will be able to access in the fall of their senior year when they're filling out applications. And these are all things to access the four pieces of financial aid, which are scholarships, grants, loans, and work study. So scholarships are the ones that I'm sure we've all heard. That's that free money that you don't have to pay back. So I always tell students scholarships are the best ones that you're looking for because this is a gift from a company, a university, an organization that helps fund students going to college. Scholarships you don't have to pay back ever. This just helps cut down the cost. It's like having a coupon for something. And then grants are funded through different organizations, and you can also access them through the federal government. It's money that you also don't have to pay back, but you do have to qualify for in a certain way, which could be through being low income. It could be through you're going to fulfill this program, a study abroad program. You're going to do some research for the university. So they're going to give you a grant to either go towards tuition or also to go towards that research. So grants have more of a checks and balance on them of, okay, I'll give you this free money, but you need to make sure you fulfill this. You need to stay at this university for all 4 years, or you need to be within this certain income bracket. So the next one are loans. That's the other piece that you can pull out from the government. And that is the one that's the scary one that everyone talks about, of being in crippling debt from loans. So that's the stuff that you take out either through the federal government or through private loan operations, private banks. So this is the stuff that can add up quickly because those sticker prices, which we'll talk about in a second, for colleges can look very steep, and people just get excited and they want to just, fine, I'll take out $50,000 a year for 4 years. And then that's without looking at the fine print, without looking at interest rates. And that's where it can stagger and get a little scary. And a lot of families, if they're educated enough, they know not to do that. But that also means taking away some university options if they are too expensive and the grants and scholarships are not paying enough for it. They're not making ends meet. And then the fourth one is definitely a fun one, work study. Work study is a university-funded opportunity that you do qualify for by filling out the government financial aid application. But this is by having a job on a college campus, it can actually go straight towards your tuition and cut that down. So these are just the buzzwords that you'll see in a financial aid offer letter when you're talking about paying for college. So back to that sticker price thing, what does that mean? So the sticker price of a college is when you Google search, Santa Clara University, what is the overall charge for tuition, for room and board, books, transportation services, whatever fees, and they give you this big scary number. For private schools ends up being somewhere between $50,000 to $70,000 a year, depending on where the college is or what their costs are. So that sticker price, it's that initial piece. And we're comparing this now to something called EFC, which is the estimated family contribution. This is a number that is given to you after you apply for financial aid and after you have already calculated how many scholarships your student's been awarded, how much financial aid you've been given by the government, how much you've been given by the university itself, all the things that go into financial aid. So it's sticker price minus financial aid is what the EFC is. So usually it's based on where your family's income level, assets, what certain programs you qualify for, all of that's taken into consideration. And this is the number that they actually expect your family to contribute towards the student's tuition. And then on this slide, you can also see a few different resources. This is how you can actually find out when we're talking about now transitioning into what can I access now moving forward to find out how much college actually costs. Net price calculators. It's now a required piece of every single college website that you have to have this tool on there that you put in a little bit of tax information. It's pretty much what you would put in on the financial aid application. And the net price calculator for every single school will, in a moment, calculate what your EFC is most likely going to be. So before you even submit an application to a college and you go through all of the labor of doing that, and then just to find out that they're not going to give you enough money for your student to go there, you can do the net price calculator completely before the process and see, is the school going to be within range? Granted, it's not always 100% accurate and it gets a little complicated what they ask on there, but just knowing that those tools are available to you can be a good first step in this process. Same with the FAFSA forecaster and the FAFSA website. Those are websites that actually are used to apply for that financial aid to the federal government. And then the last one is the CSS profile, which is another way to apply financial aid for private schools. So when we're talking about what's out there and how do we calculate all this and really what goes into it, these websites are pretty much the bread and butter of what a college counselor is going to start with to have those initial conversations on helping you figure those things out. And then it gets more complicated over time, but it's definitely a good start.
And one question kind of around that. So like as far as covering the cost of colleges, mm-hmm. do you see like any sort of trends? Like is it mostly like, parents that are paying for a lot of that? Is it students? Is it student taking out loan, that sort of a deal?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any trends in that?
It's also family specific, which I know is honestly the most frustrating answer that every college counselor I work with, this is just our motto is it depends. So, trends definitely happen, but since so much of this is family and student specific, I have students that families have been, their parents are well endowed enough financially that they've been saving a big chunk of money that they say, congratulations, you can go anywhere you want regardless of cost. And then I have all the way to the students that literally will have been told their whole life, you're going to community college unless you figure out how to do this on your own because we make $30,000 a year. And so, that's for everything in life. That's not just for your college fund. So there is definitely a widespread range of students that I work with who are all over the place. But I think the trend that I am seeing, because this generation is actually very pragmatic. They're very aware and they're very conscious of what jobs will lead to financial stability. And so that's why I'm sending a lot of students to college majoring in business, health sciences, engineering, and computer science. This generation just kind of knows really what's on the forefront of what's going to make them hireable in the future. and focusing on those things, it's yielding, hardworking kids who also are looking for scholarships, who are also applying to colleges that they know they can get tuition reduction, or that they do in-state tuition, or they are also all not trying to take out a ton of loans, because I think that narrative has been spoken to them for so much of their teenage years that I have students applying to 100 plus scholarships a year, even if the scholarship is just for $200 or $300 here. If you earn enough of those, you could pay for, half your tuition potentially each year if it's a reoccurring scholarship, and things like that. And it's also students who, I think historically, when you are that really, really high achieving student with the highest GPA in your school and the highest test score, the most extracurriculars, the president of everything, everyone assumes, oh, well, so-and-so is going to go to an Ivy League, or to one of the really competitive University of California schools, or to the really, Michigan and UT Austin, all these really competitive state schools that everyone puts on a pedestal. And they actually are more times than not now going to colleges that are more of those target and likely schools, because those target and likely schools pay really, really well with scholarships for merit-based aid, which is aid and scholarships based on the students' data, transcripts, so their classes, their GPA, the rigor of their classes, all the activities. So I've had students go to college that seems below their level or below their reputation, because they're going to get it all paid for. And that, to me, is the smartest way to take advantage of earning your degree. If you can walk out of university and without having to owe anybody anything, and you still got a good education, then that's definitely more of the conversation right now.
So you're saying more students are kind of looking ahead and thinking like, what's the financial impact after, or what are majors that will, one, I'll find a job, and two, be able to afford the cost of living, et cetera, wherever they decide to live, and intentionally picking that, unlike someone like myself, who I'm an engineer major, but I feel like I signed up for the classes and just couldn't figure out how to transfer. So, here I am. But yeah, that's great to hear.
I agree. Hopefully maybe it's me having an impact on them, but I'm wanting them to do more and more of that. So for closing thoughts, just to wrap up everything we've talked about, I know it's information overload. This whole process this is just scratching the surface of a lot of the nitty gritty of how complicated the college admissions process is. So 3 pieces that I think are the greatest pieces of support for families and students. First, student self-advocacy. If you have a student right now in your life, whether it's, it's you, your child, a niece, nephew, somebody, encourage them to advocate for themselves. That is the biggest piece of this right now that we're seeing, play out, and how successful a student is during high school, through their admissions process, and where they get accepted as a student that's willing to put themselves out there, have confidence, learn soft skills of how to communicate and network with people, and just be willing to advocate for themselves. So student self-advocacy is a great first start to all of this, is taking ownership over their own college experience. They don't want mom and dad or parents to micromanage. It should be their process. And then here come in the support roles as far as the professionals. I highly encourage speaking to friends in your community about things, but the biggest issue is, what voice do I listen to at a certain point when you ask too many people too many questions? So at a certain point, you're going to want to have someone who actually has this as a job and a career. And I respect the parents that come to me and they say, well, so-and-so, my sister went to Harvard, so she's helping my student with the entire application. That's incredible. But your sister might have gone to Harvard in, 1994, not in 2021. So the world has changed. Things are very different now. And you want someone who's on top of the trends, talking to colleges, talking with college reps, seeing students, hundreds of students go through this process every year, so they know the nuances. That's a college counselor. That's someone like me who has a degree in this, has years of experience, that knows what this process looks like right now. And so college counselors are definitely, if you're feeling completely all over the place and floundering with this, that's a good professional place to start. And that can be on-site at your student's high school. That can be looking into the private sector. There's a wide range of getting this, but sometimes having someone who just knows how to answer those questions without you asking random voices or reading blogs and Reddits or whatever your source of interest is, that's get a professional voice. And that also, I will attest to this, goes for the financial piece of it. Because as much as I just sounded like I know what I'm talking about, that was the max of my financial aid information. That is about as far as I go with knowing the inner workings of how families manage their money and access certain things to get to that next stage. It's a piece of it that I'm just not always brought into because families know their financial situations better than anybody else, but sometimes they don't know how to manage it in relation to this process. So I can provide the buzzwords and the resources and the links, but the actual, okay, how do I get from knowing that my EFC is only going to be $20,000 a year to what does that actually look like in reality? And how do I manage my money to make this actually work? And I've got 3 more kids after this one. So how does this all play out? That is where a financial advisor comes in. And thank goodness I'm married to one. But it's definitely, these are resources that you could access for all of those 3 pieces of criteria that we discussed today. And then a little bit just also touching on what I discussed about college counseling. Like one of the companies that I do work for is UC Easy. It's a company based out of the Bay Area and Silicon Valley. And this just is kind of a good explanation of what college counseling is. And it's simplifying the high school journey and the college admissions process. So it's something to be able to have someone translate, because I feel that American high school and American college life is pretty much another language. It's like you need a whole other class in order to fully understand the process. So having guidance, having someone who gives you a little bit of personalized attention, depending on whichever years of high school you want your student to focus on that. UCEZ is a great company that does work primarily with students of parents who were educated outside the U.S., but they do a good job of breaking down, how do we simplify this so that it doesn't sound like gibberish to everyone? And that's me.
Thank you, Julia. Yeah, a lot of good points in there. We've gotten a few questions kind of throughout here. So I'm going to take some time to toss a few your way here. One of them is kind of, we've talked about, you and I, just, there's things I guess, married couples talk about, the value of an undergraduate degree. And we kind of talk about, is it worth paying a lot of, there's just so many questions under that go kind of underneath that. And, kind of one of them, if a student doesn't really know what they want to achieve with college. So it's like, what do I want to do with my life? What do I want my major to be? All of that, then, you're taking on a big investment to then go off and sort of, not having a whole lot of direction there. What would you recommend to a student like that?
Yeah, I, again, will always say, going back to that word fit, what is the appropriate fit for a student, for a family? I do think, and this is going to be my own personal experience of seeing the success and what feels logical to me. If you're a student in that situation, I would never want to go into debt or commit to a university and maybe even waste that first time at a university on a college that you're going to be floundering at and figuring things out. I think that the community college transfer track can be so perfect for so many families. So even in this overall planning piece and figuring out the finances, there is nothing to be ashamed about saying, I'm going to do community college, take my general education credits, which when you think about it, most colleges, you just take general education for the first at least year, maybe year and a half. And if you're paying full price, maybe at like a Columbia, $72,000 a year to take some general education credits that you could have taken at, SUNY, the community college system in New York, like that seems crazy to me sometimes if you don't know what you want to do. It's totally different if you go in and I want to be a mechanical engineer. That degree takes 4 years to do. I don't want to spend any more time than 4 years. I'm going to come in hot to Columbia and do it. That makes more sense for me to start that 4-year process. But for a student that's figuring things out, either go to an affordable in-state school that has lots of major options. You can still have that traditional first-year dorm moving in experience, because I do think a piece of it that needs to be discussed is how important the growth process is when you do gain your independence, moving out, being able to figure things out on your own, figuring out the balance of academics on your own and a job. The traditional first year of college experience is so valuable for human development. I think that is very, very, very important, but that also doesn't need to be achieved immediately if a student is not ready or if a family's finances are not a situation. There's no need to take out a bunch of loans for a school again. That's just because you feel the pressure that, oh, this is what you do. I'm 18, I'm graduating from high school, I now have to go to a 4-year college. So choosing that community college path or the bigger, cheaper in-state school, or just taking advantage even of working for a year, a gap year. There's so many different pathways and options. I don't think one size fits all. It's all about the right fit for you and your family and your student.
Awesome. Yeah, you kind of mentioned community colleges there. So, I mean, is there you can talk about just the differences between community college, university. You did touch a little bit about the pathway and the pricing on each, but any
Sure.
more you would add to that?
Yeah, just a quick breakdown, I guess, on, again, that's part of this lingo and terminology that just feels like a whole other world. Community colleges are 2-year colleges. So they are colleges that you can earn classes, general college credits, associate degrees, or professional certificates from. So they aren't 4-year bachelors, Bachelor of Arts, Bachelor of Science. Those are 4-year degrees that have a direct correlation to higher income in our country. That's just a data-driven fact that people with bachelor's degrees and master's degrees, any sort of higher level of education, do get paid more in the workforce. So a community college degree, although that does give you a leg up maybe on a specific professional pathway, or associate's degrees are a good stepping stone. That's a 2-year degree from a community college. You will automatically get paid more with a bachelor's versus an associate's. So often students will go to a community college, either a local one, to their home, so that they live at home for a couple of years. And those credits, getting a community college associate's degree usually costs about $2,000 to $3,000. That's in California. I'm sure it's cheaper in other places, but about $3,000 in California versus maybe 2 years at a public school in California could cost between $30,000 to $60,000 if you're a Cal State or a UC, versus a private school, which could be $50,000 to $100,000. So as far as the tiers, a community college, only $2,000 versus maybe $100,000, that's definitely a huge savings.
Yeah, so you talk about the types of degrees, right? Associate, bachelor, et cetera. Then what about the major? Like, what if it's a major that might not be, let's just say, as employable or profitable as another major? If a student is leaning that way and you're a parent, I mean, do you want to kind of persuade them to look at other options, or, how would you approach something like that?
That's also going to depend on the field. I think that obviously there's a stigma when it comes to humanities majors, kind of a general liberal arts label that, oh, it's not a technical enough, employable enough, hireable enough degree. But what we are finding, what we're seeing, is that people with different skill sets and their brains are wired differently. So that's really what college does. It's training you on a way to think. I can't remember everything from my Psych 101 class my freshman year of college, but I learned skills and habits and a way of working with people and learning how to study, so that I have been able to absorb, information and continue being a professional in the psychology field. So that's different. And I think that that's what people are looking for a lot of times. Even engineering companies, they're looking for environmental science majors or history majors or, philosophy majors. Like Google's been hiring all sorts of philosophy majors because they've got this complete moral, question right now of whether or not social media is something that's damaging society. So they're trying to hire sociologists and people that are in these other fields who think a different way, look at things a different way, so that they're not just a tech company, or you're not just an engineering firm, or you're not just financial advisors. I mean, heck, you're a perfect example. You're an engineer turned financial advisor. So you bring all sorts of, skill sets as far as organization and retention and detail and systems to a different job. So your student, it could be that they're pursuing a degree that doesn't seem hireable at the time. That would be good to work with a counselor or a career advisor, so that they can kind of open up the perspective on really what jobs out there right now, what can you do with certain degrees. And think about it, I mean, there's millions of us. We all fill these different jobs. We're not all just, technicians and engineers and computer scientists. We need thousands and millions of different jobs and skill sets. I do think that there's obviously a correlation, quick tangent on the arts. That is always going to be a very, very, very competitive field. But as my actress mother raised me, she said, if you wake up in the morning and you can't breathe unless you're acting, then maybe encourage your student to still pursue acting, because that sounds pretty fundamental to who they are as a person. But it's all about conversation and helping your student also come up with those backup plans or other options, or how can they channel maybe their artistic ability into a job so that they don't feel like they're sacrificing themselves for a career.
Well, I do love my mother-in-law, so that's good advice. Yeah. And as an engineer, I was kind of the engineer who's like, don't get on my bridge. So I think this is better suited for me. But so I got one last question here for you, and then I need to go clean the house before my wife gets home. But so there's a lot of information here we've been talking about, and there's where do you start? How much should parents and students be devoting to this? Like researching and trying to apply for colleges, and then really when should they start? Is this something we can just kind of get rolling at the end of junior year?
Yes, definitely developmental stage and grade level specific times to start. I think a family can start having the conversations as early as ninth grade, because all 4 of your years of high school are a cumulative progression to when you actually apply. But please don't put that pressure on in ninth grade. Those little baby 14-year-olds are just going through puberty and trying to figure out how to adjust to high school and figure out how to do homework and how to sustain their identities. They do not need, parental pressure saying, well, where are you going to go to college? So I think that's my number one advice, is if you're talking about it in 9th and 10th grade, have it be a conversation. Have it just be something you're both researching together. Have it be a family activity. Go visit a college campus on the weekend for fun, just walking around and exploring. Don't make it something that you need to have all the answers, because your child at 14 is radically different developmentally, mentally, cognitively, physically, every single way by the time they click submit on an application. So 9th and 10th grade, let's focus on the fun and the personal development, and what are they doing in high school? What classes are they taking? What interests do they have? What clubs are they a part of? Things like that. And then really junior year is when you actually start to think about it. Fall of junior year, you can start thinking about building that general college list. You can actually even start applying for scholarships in your junior year. Usually there's a lot of junior level specific scholarships out there that you can look for through different scholarship, database websites. And then you can't even start filling out a college application until August 1st at the earliest of their senior year. So I always laugh when I have families that think, January of the junior year, we're behind. We have so much we need to do. Like, what do you need to do? It doesn't even open for 8 more months. So definitely breathe. Definitely spring of junior year, go through that college search process. Start building that list, asking your student about that criteria. What are their interests? What do they want out of a college? And then summertime, fall of senior year, that's when it's pedal to the metal. And that's when you really can get started on the actual tangible applying to college process.
Well,
Awesome. Well, sorry. Yeah. No, I was just I think we're wrapping up now. So before I kick it to Marche, Julia, thank you so much. I thought we had some good chemistry here, so maybe we'll start a podcast or something.
Gosh.
So
kick him off. Someone turn him off.
I'm done. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, everyone. This has been such an informative and fun webinar. Thank you. We really loved having you here. Those of you who are attending our live event, look for a link to a replay of this event in your email soon, and you're welcome to share that replay with friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who is a great fit for you and your life. Sorry, I put the wrong slide up there. For you, your life, and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners is committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. Once again, from Advice Chaser, thank you so much for coming. Thanks to our guests, and we will see you at another webinar soon. Bye, everyone.